Okay, mini-ERT number 3. Where we were at the end of mini-ERT number 2, my computer's just calming down. It's a little bit warm. And we have got this graph, which is fine. I mean, it's proxy temperature, degrees C, calculated from delta D, which is informative. And it's got the ice age in years. Okay. However, it's a bit ugly. You've got to be honest at this stage. So the first thing I do is axes like this, where you've got redundant numbers, i.e. all these zeros, they're ugly. Okay, now there's a couple of ways you can cope with this. What you could do is you could say, okay, I'll have thousands of years. And a cheaty way to do that, if there's always more than one way to do something. And it's always good to be adaptable. When you're adaptable, you learn so many things. Is we could just divide the ice age number by 1,000, because that would give you the ice age as in thousands of years. So obviously, if we divide, so it's got to be equals to let the spreadsheet know that you're going to write an equation. So I want to divide that number in the cell next to where I am, divided by 1, 1, 2, 3, and return. And sure enough, that's half a kiloyear, half 1,000 years. And if we use that relative cell addressing and copy that down to here, then look, 1,009 years is 1.009 kiloyears. Now obviously when we plot that, you're going to get rid of 3 noughts on here, which will look a lot nicer. There's also there's another way that you can alter the display. Sorry, it doesn't like to. No, I normally, as I say, use a shortcut, so I do apologise. So if we go back to axes and we go into horizontal for your x-axis and say, now it's got an idea of what we want, because it's realised Excel's clever, sometimes too clever for its own good, that we might want it in thousands. All right. So what I'm going to do, because look, you can see what the number is here. You can go to number, and you can change. At the moment, it's linked to source, but you can actually change that. However, I'm going to cancel that, because let's go for an easy life. Go back to this and go to axes and say vertical axis, axis in thousands. And as if by magic, nothing has happened. Oh, that's because I did. Have you seen? Quicker than I did. That's because I have done the vertical axis by mistake. And I'm going to say default. And I'm going to change it. It's a good job I'm making these mistakes, because I'm showing you what to do when you make a mistake, which is don't panic, which I didn't, because I don't use this facility in Excel. I do it a different way. Okay, so now I've got this much nicer looking graph. I don't like that thousands there though, but luckily we can get rid of that. Just delete, and we've got to change the unit to Ka. Yeah. So we've now got our data displayed in thousands of years, so this looks much, much neater. Don't forget, you can change the size of the fonts very easily if you don't like the numbers, they're too small. Now, I think personally these symbols are a tad large for the size of graph. Oh, sorry, I'm doing it the way I would do it. Sorry, the quicker way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to try and change the symbols. And I'm not sure how to do this the way that you should do it. Let's have a look at data labels. We don't have data labels. We've got symbols. So and unfortunately it's right underneath my current series. Let's do format selection. And look, as if by magic, we have marker style, automatic size 9, bit big, and we can change which one we want. So let's go for a little cross, that's nice and neat, and we'll say size 6. Okay, so just to recap, I got into that by going to chart format. It shows the current series, which is, we've only got one series, the 2 columns, an X and a Y, one Y axis, and I clicked on format selection and I went down to marker style, but play with all this, you know. At the moment it's pale blue, so I'm going to go for marker line and say the colour is always auto, and say that I think, to be honest, I'm going to have black. Right. Woo! No. That's because I've gone to, right, forget that. We'll stick with our line as it is in blue, and I'm going to say OK. Okay. Now, much smaller, still a bit shonky. Now that could be because you want to change the size, the aspect ratio of your chart. Sometimes you need to do this to get things to display to their advantage. So look, much better. Something you can see straight away is there's far more data here than there are here. You know, the spacing between the data as far as the time goes, it's becoming a bigger period between data. We've got far more data up here. Now if you want to, rather than have individual data markers, you can, oh sorry, I'm doing it the way you shouldn't do it, of course. Sorry about that. We can say we don't want a marker, but we do want a line, and we're going to have it in black. I'm going to say yes, and OK. Ta-da! See, it was worrying about nothing. A bit thick, that line, so you can actually change the thickness of the line by going into weights. This is all just like Word, because everything is the same as Word, because it's a Microsoft product. There you go. Now, doesn't that look neater? Now, we do go off our graph here, so I'm going to go back over here, and I'm going to click on there, and to me this is quicker than being menu driven, you see, and I need scale. And really, I think we ought to go to 51.5. And say, oh, but the major unit is 2. So I'm going to do that and say OK. Now that's much nicer because we can see the top of the data loops, the peak, the maxima, and we can see the minima. Okay, really quite lovely. Looking better, hey, already. Now, some of you might be saying, so why didn't she do a line graph in the first place? I could have done. And in this instance, a line graph would have worked. Okay. And the reason because it would have worked is because the data are organised sequentially, i.e. the data are organised in depth down whole, going from the top to the bottom in a regular fashion. Now, if these data weren't ordered like that, you couldn't use a line graph, and I wouldn't use a line graph anyway, because if you use a line graph, you can't perform any statistical tests on that graph. So when you're wanting to compare data, use XY scatter plots if at all possible. Now, I could leave it like that, that's really quite nice. Or alternatively, I may want to just look in detail at that last 100,000 years. And so I never change that one chart. I just do Command C and go down a little bit and Command V, and I've created another chart as if by magic. And I'm going to change the scale to format axis so that my maximum is 150, right? I don't want minus 1,000 years because that's projecting it into the future, and I haven't got the facility to do that yet. I could do that by doing a extrapolation, but I'm not going to. I'm going to change instead the major unit to 10. I hope you followed all of that, and I'm going to say OK. And now I'm looking at just the last 150,000 years. I could interrogate the data if I wanted to do this visually by looking at, what about the last 20,000 years? So again, for me, I just format text. Sorry, no, I don't. I'm going to get it very upset. I'm going to say cancel. Shall I do it the way I've told you to do it, hey? Chart layout, possibly safer. And we're going to go to axes, and we're going to look at the horizontal or the y-axis, and we're going to go to options. And now we're going to say go to 25,000, not 150,000, but 25,000 years. And we're going to have this as, shall we have it as 1? Possibly a bit much, hey? Shall we have it as 2,000? That's better, isn't it? We could actually start to bring in minor units as well if we wanted to, minor tick marks, because we could go to here and we'll say, okay, we've got the major outside and we'll have the minor inside. What the hell? Okay, and there you go. And what we've done, I'm going to change this because it looks a bit weird now. I'm going to change it back into a more square format. Right? And what we've done is we have created a graph. Just move that up. We've created a graph that is showing the past 25,000 years of the ice core data from the G4 core. You'd put a title up here saying that it was the proxy data were from G4. And I'll just move this in slightly because it's just making that a bit cramped. Okay. And we could probably bring that down a little bit to make it look prettier. And we can say that this is the temperature of the atmosphere when the ice precipitated, when it condensed. And we have got the major tick marks at every 2,000 years, but we've got minor tick marks. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there. So they're every 400 years. And you can say, okay, 25,000, this was the peak of glaciation. We had a really quite rapid rise. You could work out that at almost 17,000 years ago it was minus 62, but only, 3 and a bit thousand years later it was minus 55.8, well, say minus 56. So in only 3,000 years we jumped up by 6 degrees centigrade, okay, which is quite a rapid rate of change. But compare that to today's temperature change and it's pretty small beer. I'm leaving it there. Well done if you've done all 3 mini-Earths. We could go on and do loads and loads of stuff, but once you get going, you need to play with the graphs yourself. You can just, by the way, use that Command C, that copy, and you can put that graph into a Word document and retain all the links to this spreadsheet. Just one word about the changing scale. If I was stupid enough to want to do a regression line on this data set, which is add trend line, and I'll go for linear, okay, and just say okay. Serves me right. So you've got to understand the question before you ask it, really. Then I will get that, okay. However, if I want to do a regression line just on these data, I can't just click on this graph. And the reason for that is if I click on that data series, you'll see that it's still referencing the whole data series E6 to E3616. All that's happened is, as far as the computer's concerned, all of those data are being used, but I've just cut off the visual bit of the chart down to the first however many rows that it is the first 25,000 years. Okay, so if we do any data analyses on this data series just by clicking on add trend line, although at the moment let me do that again. Okay, then this time if I do that, it's going to come up with exactly the same trend line as it did for the other graph, because it's using exactly the same data set. So it's a waste of time really doing it. Wowee. Okay. To do a regression on just these data, you would have to just have these data in your series, i.e. reduce this number here or make a new graph just going as far down as 25,000 years. Okay, I hope you understood that, probably as clear as mud, as they say where I come from. And meanwhile, enjoy playing with Excel, with the Greenland data set, and don't forget to ask loads of questions. And to play yourself, you can't do anything wrong, especially if you keep saving your data. And indeed, what I do is I have an archived data file. I save it as, for instance, in this case, Antarctic Data Archive, and I don't do anything to that. And I open that spreadsheet up, and I save it as Antarctic Data Working. And then I can do whatever I want on that spreadsheet and save it as Antarctic Data Working. And I know that I haven't corrupted the original data file. Okay? Enjoy.